Thanks for tuning in to The Real Deal Show, brought to you by eBodyboarding.com and Tribe Boards. Well, how you doing, everybody? Jay Reale back at you with another episode of The Real Deal Show. And you know what? This is one of my best friends from way back in the day, compatriot, compadre, comrade. This is Keith Sasaki. What's up, Keith?
Not much, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man.
Thanks for remaining my friend after decades of torment, and actually just fun. So we're here today, and thanks for having me on this rainy day in San Clemente. Welcome rain to Southern California, and California in general. So good stuff. Yeah, big time.
Now, you know, I interviewed you. It was about a year and a half ago. We figured. Long time ago, and we just basically scratched the surface. We did 2 episodes, and we just didn't really get into a lot of the meat of it that I wanted to get to. So here we are, back together, part 3, and we're going to get into some more detail on, you know, let's just recap. For part 1 and 2, we talked about your early days in the sport, leading into your pro bodyboarding career. And we kind of finished up with the winter that we both spent in a house on the North Shore, which was super fun and torturous and everything in between. We did a lot of crazy stuff that winter, but it was really fun for me because that was my first winter as a pro bodyboarder, and I
didn't realize that.
We just got to spend, you know, the whole winter in that house, and that was kind of my introduction to the world of pro bodyboarding and winter on the North Shore. So that was sort of the beginning, the early days of the PSAA tour. And I talked briefly in the previous parts about how your journey on that tour went. So initially when the tour started, you won the tour, right?
I did. The tour actually started, I believe the first year was 1986.
Okay.
And there were 6 events, Santa Cruz, Huntington Beach, Oceanside, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
And I had one bad result, and I think that was San Francisco. And for whatever reason, that one result, those 300-something points were never registered. It was like a no-show on the overall cumulative total tally.
Somebody screwed up?
Yeah, Bill Sullivan.
He lives in Japan now, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, so the last event at Huntington Beach takes place on the north side, and I can't remember who was in the final. Probably me and Danny, Ben, Mike. It would have been Mike because Mike had never missed a final in his career, and 2 other people.
Yep.
6-man final, probably the best of 4 waves.
Okay.
And I win the event. I did my math. You know, I had my calculations of what I needed to do. I could not finish second, I believe. I had to win the event. So
wow, that's pressure, man.
It's pressure enough. So you know, they're going down the results. You know, 6th place, 5th place, 4th place, 3rd place. Hey, maybe I got a chance. You know, 2nd place, Ben Severson.
Oh man.
And Ben Severson, and I think at the same time they announced, and also the winner of the 1986 Bud Tour, and I'm like, what? You know?
Yeah. You pulled it off.
I pulled it off. I pulled it off, and but winning the event, Keith Sasaki, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think, hey, I think I won the tour. You better do your math or something like that. So. Yeah, it all worked out in the end. You know, a couple weeks later, it was officially made. You know that I had won the tour. But you know, a little bit of the thunder, a little bit of the glory on the beach was, you know, lost, I guess, in the moment. But hey.
Yeah, but so that's a pretty good notch to have in your belt, being the winner of the first PSAA tour, the first domestic tour winner. That's pretty awesome.
It was awesome. You know, it was at a time where the Maestros took a chance, really, on bodyboarding.
And this is Ronnie and Robbie Maestrel, who started dive and surf up in the South Bay here in Southern California, Body Glove.
Yeah.
And they were juggernauts in the surf industry at
Yeah.
that time. And they added the bodyboarding division.
Yeah.
And Joey Baran kind of was the director of the tour, as I recall.
I believe he was. I believe he was. But the Maestros also, and not to pat myself on the back, but they were always exposed to bodyboarding as well.
Yeah.
And then I think I mentioned this on the podcast earlier that the year prior, 1985, I traveled on the Bud Pro Tour with my good buddy Andy Fomenko, who I'm staying with here in San Clemente, because he was competing to become the 1985 Winter Champion.
Oh wow!
They had like a
seasonal tour, like
seasonal tour, seasonal tour. And I went to 2 or 3 events with them.
Okay.
So I was always in contact with the Maestros and all the surfers on tour. And so, they had some sort of exposure, and I believe the Maestros bodyboarded back then. I think they sponsored Kurt Rambis.
Okay. The basketball player.
And he bodyboarded.
Okay.
And
I remember him being in Bodyboarding magazine for that. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there is a video out there somewhere where Pat Caldwell and I went and did one of PT's shows up in Los Angeles. I can't remember the name of the show, and Kurt Rambis was there. And I didn't know who Kurt was, But Pat's like, that's Kurt Rambis. Looks like a big old 6'8" white guy for me.
Yeah, right. Giant redwood.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Classic, man.
Yeah.
So you won that first year on the tour. I joined in on the second year. I think there was one event at the wave pool out in Palm Springs at some point in there.
Well, there were a couple, at least 2 events that I know of, if not 3. One of them definitely in Palm Springs.
Yep. That was before I moved to California.
Yeah, up in Palm Springs, and I don't. Yeah, so you weren't in the fun van, the fun motorhome when we drove up. It was me, Cameron Steele, Andy Fomenko, Danny Kim, and Caven.
I was in one where we went to Pismo the next year.
Okay.
But
that wasn't a wave pool.
No.
And then there were at least 1 or 2 events at Raging Waters in Irvine.
Oh, Wild Rivers. Yeah,
Wild Rivers.
Raging Waters
Right,
and San
right.
Dimas. Yeah, Wild Rivers. I did those events.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
But there was a sort of a pivot in the judging criteria. So you won that first year, and then things started to go in a different direction in terms of the judging, like towards Mike and Ben, who seemed to win every event for like 3 or 4 years, prone riding, and you were going out and doing the same thing that won you the tour, and it wasn't winning you the tour anymore. It's like the judges were suddenly thinking, let's reward the prone guys. Was there some sort of controversy there? Were those guys complaining to the judges because you and, say, Danny Kim, who was doing stand-up riding on the tour, were winning?
The panel of judges judged both surfing and bodyboarding.
Yeah. And they were surfers.
They were surfers, and so I think Danny benefited from that as well.
Yep.
They saw what Danny was doing on the on his boogie.
Yep.
And they said, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. And someone else takes off and does a belly twirl.
Yeah, and they're thinking that's easy.
What's that?
Right.
What's that? That's boogie boarding. That's true.
Yeah.
Boogie boarding in a bad way.
Yep.
So after the first year, probably midway through the second year. I mean, there's speculation that there's conversations between the upper echelon of the prone riders had a conversation with the judging panels. Who really knows?
Right.
Who really knows? But I had already won a title. Yes, I would have loved to have won a second or a third one.
Yeah.
Never happened. It is what it is. I stuck to my guns, and I think probably I continued competing, and I refused to prone ride. I always drop kneed in my heats, no matter if it was a small mushy left, which I can't prone ride anyways. I don't know how to prone ride to save my life.
You can. I've seen you do it.
So I refused to
You refuse to cave into the pressures.
Yeah, I refuse to conform.
Yeah.
You know, I never really want to be a conformist of it, which has got me in trouble many times as well. Hey, do this now.
Yeah, you always stuck to your guns.
I always stuck to my guns. Yeah. But yeah, and I had a pretty good agreement with Maury, with O'Neill, both wetsuits and sportswear, and whoever else backed me. That listen, contest results are important, but they're not the primary focus for me, at least.
Yeah.
You know, and at that point, that's when the magazines. You know, we concentrated a lot on the magazine and working on photo shoots with Aaron Lloyd, who you just did a podcast with.
Yeah.
Brian Peelmix, Hank,
and by the way, I'll put the link to the Aaron Lloyd show right at the top of your screen, folks. Yeah. So check that out.
So the concentration on my agreements with those companies had somewhat switched to, you know, instead of contest results, into exposure, complete marketing exposure in magazines, doing promotional work, etc. And I said, hey, great, not 100% pressure to win an event. Although I was still competing in, winning some of the smaller events, the Maury events, and whatever other events that organizers would have. But yeah, it was a weird time. It was a weird time.
Yeah.
It was frustrating, definitely frustrating. Going from getting first, second, third, fourth, be fifth and sixth or whatever it is, being on the podium, to missing out in the semifinals, and then later on missing out in the quarterfinals. So it was a weird time. It was a weird time, but hey.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. It was a weird time because, in the early days of bodyboarding competition, everything was mixed together. Prone, drop knee, you did it all, right? And a lot of riders were very versatile. Back then, you were sort of encouraged to be good at both, prone and drop knee. That's how I started, and that was kind of the mentality I had. But at some point, when the judging started going sort of on the Bud Tour, the PSAA Tour, towards the prone guys, I mean, I remember just seeing you at Lowers when we had the event there, just killing it, right? And everybody's like, oh my God, Keith killed it in that heat, and you still would get knocked out of the heat.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, a pivotal moment in the sport, because it showed that there was now a dividing line between prone and drop knee. It was sort of like, longboarding and shortboarding. They separated it into two different divisions when shortboards came into the fray in the 60s. You couldn't have these guys surf together because the style of surfing was so different. And you would still have a few guys, like I think Dave Parmenter famously went out in the U.S. Open on a longboard because it was so tiny, just to make a statement, that this is the right board for these waves. This is ridiculous that all these guys are trying to ride little toothpicks in 1 foot surf. So you were sort of that guy in bodyboarding, trying to still make that statement, but nonetheless, the sport eventually did sort of fracture off into a prone and drop knee division. I mean, how does that grab you? What do you think about that? Do you think that was a good move or a bad thing that now there's separate drop knee and prone divisions?
Well, first of all, I really like that statement of Parmenter going out on a longboard. It's just, he voiced his discontent.
Yeah.
So Parmenter, thumbs up. To his younger brother John.
Bam, bam.
I love John. But I really don't think the PSA had a choice at that point. They were, although we were probably racking in 45, 48, 64 competitors.
Yep.
Per event, which is quite a lot of people.
Yep.
64 competitors per event. I still think that they had no choice. They could not fracture away and say we're going to have a drop knee division with a jack stance division with 12 people, and then a open prone division with 48 people.
Just not enough hours.
There's just not enough.
Exactly.
I mean, it came down to really it was a business.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. It is hey, unfortunate. Jordan Staller did a video several years ago, 2 waves of me at Trestles, and I looked at it and don't want to pat myself on the back, but yeah, they were very well written waves.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know, getting like 3.5s on what today would be on the judging scale, you know, 8.59. 9.3s,
yeah,
and, you know, getting like 3.7. It's like, okay,
right,
whatever.
Yeah, so
whatever.
At that point, I guess you kind of conceded, like, okay, man, I guess this is how it's going to be from now on.
Yeah, but you know, I believe those waves. I think that happened already when I was in a different part of my life. Anyways, I think that was probably the early 90s, and I had already moved on.
Yeah.
I moved on from competitive bodyboarding 100%. I was living in France, and I was living in France and still on the promotional train, and you know, whenever I could, I do some events.
Yeah, so you slid on into, you know, or out of focus on competition, as you mentioned earlier, focusing on photo trips and promoting your sponsors. You were really the pioneer of that whole thing, of the free surfing bodyboarder. At least to me, you know, you were the first guy to do it. You were sort of the guy who showed us all the roadmap of how to promote our sponsors in photos and videos. One of the little things, this is one that I learned from you, was to write the logos of our sponsors on the blade of our fin. Yeah. Because when you go up and hit the lip drop knee, there's your fin facing the camera. Yeah. Get all the logos, and I made a lot of money because of that.
100%.
Just one tip. Any other little hacks that you used to do? I mean, I know some that you taught me, but
well, the other one was, you know, we would analyze our photos, whether they be already photos that were printed in the magazine, or ones that Beelman or Lloyd or Hank or Rob Brown would show us, you know, doing a big old turn, but. You know, you can see our board perfectly. You can see our wetsuits perfectly, but we can't see any logos.
Right.
So at that point, you know, we were sponsored by O'Neill back then, and you know, they were really open to helping us out. So you know, we go to the promotions manager and say, listen, look at this photo, or you know, I analyze photos, and would it be possible to have a logo here and a logo down the back here?
Yeah, because bodyboarding, it's different,
yeah,
right? Where your body shows up in the photo.
Yeah, and you know, if there was any questions, it's because, hey, you know, clear as day, our agreement is, you know, if I get a cover shot and you can see the O'Neill logo, you know, I write you an invoice and you pay me.
Yes.
And it's a win-win. So you know, iron on a 20-cent sticker, and we both win.
Yeah.
So that was definitely one of the tricks.
Yeah.
That was one of the tricks. You know, the other one, which I don't wear hats because, you know, I got a bald head and I just look weird wearing a hat. But you know, I would always make sure that as much as possible, and you see it these days in every kind of sport, that people would have a hat with, you know, with their sponsors' logos on it,
yeah,
etc. But yeah.
So here's other things that I learned from you. There's some great ones, man. So okay, I'll go there. That was one of them. So at the awards, two of the events, you know, we would get up on stage, and you'd want to show off your sponsors. But back then, we weren't allowed to bring our boards on stage. So Keith taught us to put stickers on our T-shirts. So I'd have like 5 stickers on my T-shirt with all my sponsors' logos on the shirt, and it worked because sometimes they run an awards ceremony shot in the magazine, and there's your logo, and you submit an invoice for photo incentive. And the other one was stencils on the board.
100%.
Yeah, you taught me how to put logos on the deck of the board. Because it's foam, you can't put a sticker on there. So you showed me this method of taking like a manila folder and an X-Acto knife, and you put a sticker on the folder, and you'd cut out the logo, and then you'd lay it over the board and use a permanent marker to color it in. And that worked great too, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a race car. You know, race cars, it's easy enough to put a decal on there, and you know, the material allows it to adhere perfectly well. You know, on a bodyboard, a boogie board, the surface is fairly porous.
Yeah.
So after a wave or two, the sticker would come right off. So we had to figure out and devise a way for our sponsors to remain, and that was a logical choice.
Yeah.
You know,
because heat stamps, those metal heat stamps, are really expensive.
Yeah,
They're
they were.
$100 per stamp, and you got to buy the Mylar and all this. So stencil, quick, easy way.
Quick, easy, cheap. I mean, you know, all it would take is an investment in your time. Today's a perfect example. It's raining. You know, you grab your bubblegum sticker, you trace it on the manila folder, you cut it out with a razor blade, and there you go.
Yeah.
You know, you have a money-making machine. You know, and again, you know, we weren't making a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we were making decent amounts, but then again, the trouble to have 6 stickers on your T-shirt, and if it appeared on a full page in the magazine, I mean, you add it up. It could be $25 from one sponsor. It could be $275 from another.
Yeah.
And all you need is three of those shots in a magazine, and the next thing you know, you have a $1,500 check.
I would always relate it to bills, like, you know, oh, this is my phone bill. This is a photo in the mag. I'll pay my phone bill this month with that, or my car payment, or whatever. So I mean, these are all hacks that I learned from Keith. I don't know if you learned them from someone else, but you were the first guy that I ever saw do that stuff.
Again, it was just, I don't think I learned it from anybody. It's just something that,
born out of necessity.
Just seeing the logos and, hey, got an opportunity here.
Yeah.
You know, this window's not going to last till I'm 59 years old, which I am today.
Yeah.
You know, that window's not going to last that long. We have a window of 3 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was. But yeah, but you know, you do give me a lot of credit. Thank you very much. But you know, there were other guys out there that were great at promoting their sponsors, and they probably did take a page out of my book, like Ron Zibel. He's another example. He competed, and he had some decent results, but then again, you know, he broke away and did these long Puerto Escondido trips.
Yeah.
You know, got a lot of photos, free rode the wedge, etc., stuff like that. So there are guys like out there that made a decent living.
Yeah, that went that route.
That went that route.
And
exactly.
we had I don't want to say venues, but we had media back then. We had magazines and videos and all that, ways to promote the sponsors that now has moved all onto social media. But we'll touch on that in a minute. I wanted to go back to something you mentioned. So you were transitioning out of competing in the early 90s, and you moved to France. Talk about that part of your life. Like, you know, you were spending time in France, obviously as a pro bodyboarder during the early 90s, you know, promoting Maury and O'Neill and whatever, and we were all over there competing in the Hoff Pro and all that. But you ended up deciding to stay over there. What was going on with your life at that point?
Okay, so 1989, Michel Hoff, who is a distributor to Maury back then, came over to the North Shore, and he had this idea of, hey, Jay, Keith, Mike, etc., why don't you come to Europe this winter, and you know, go to the Canary Islands, go to Portugal, go to Spain, and you know, finish a tour up in France, promoting the brands. And you know, you and Mike were you especially starting to shoot up in the rankings, and Mike was dominating the rankings.
Yeah.
And you want to sustain those positions.
Yeah.
While me, on the other hand, you know, my results were tanking, and again, I just needed to rethink of, you know, what I wanted to do.
Reinvent yourself.
Reinvent and my involvement in the sport.
Yep.
And so thought about it, and so now we're not, you know, 89, then all of a sudden it's 1990, and here it is. It's March, and I receive an invitation from Michel, and why don't you come over? You know, why don't you come over? Why don't you come over July and August? And I said, well, July and August, there's
all these contests.
Sorry, Michel. July and August. There's 3 events, and I'm training really hard, and I'm going to win those events. If I win these events, that's $4,500, et cetera, et cetera. Plus incentive from my sponsors for winning that. So yeah, I'd love to come over, but I'm going to lose out on $10,000.
Yeah.
So what can you do? So, but you know, we worked out something, and at the end of the day, yeah, Canary Islands. Spain, Portugal. Well, actually, it was Portugal first, and then Canary Islands, Spain, and it ended up in France, promoting the brand. And the brand was More back then.
Yep.
And just had a great old time. It's always different when you're there in summer as a tourist, touring where you're catered to. Not to be spoiled, not to feel entitled, but that's what it was like. You get over there, and your hotel room's taken care of. You go downstairs, and your meal's waiting for you, etc. Your ride is already organized to the beach. So, but anyways, I really liked the waves in Europe.
Yeah.
It catered to what I was searching for.
Yep.
It's catered to what I was searching for, and then also, I had always admired, surfers like Sean Thompson, and then I admired Tom Curran as well. And Tom was already living in France also.
Yep.
And the area that I was spending time in France was the same area. Yep. Where Tom was spending time at. So just that little thing like that. When I visited France, it said
it just felt comfortable to you.
I felt comfortable.
You felt like this could be home.
Yeah, and then I met someone that also helped cement my decision to go back and stay.
Yeah.
So and I had a great time. I had a great time in Europe. Continued promoting the brands. For a couple of years, and then the brands had a shift in mentality in that, it's great that you're getting all this exposure, but it's not part of our agreement. So what?
You being in France instead of the United States.
Exactly. So we're going to sever ties. Okay, whatever. There's other opportunities out there. So again, I had to reinvent. Went from one brand to another brand. Of board, one brand of wetsuit and clothing to another one.
Yep. You were then with Wave Rebel, and what wetsuit brand were you wearing? Sola, right?
I was using Sola.
Yeah.
I was using Sola because Sola, they distributed Wave Rebel boards.
Yep.
So, and an English-British company. And they made some really good suits. Yep. They made some really good suits.
As they should. They're based in the UK where the water's freezing. You expect them to make a good suit.
But, again, the feedback was that, hey, again, let's have the logo there. Let's change the stitching because, surfers are doing this, bodyboarding is, doing this, and so the flex of the suit. Yeah. And so they were real receptive to creating some suits.
Oh, that's good.
They even created one where it looked like a spring suit without the sleeves. Yep. But with a collar, and that was basically to keep sand out. Yeah. From short john. When
I always hated short johns for that reason. Yeah. Because when you duck dive, that low scoop neck, always water just goes right in there.
And it also had a great look. It made me look even more like a model.
Hold that thought, Keith. Here's what I'm going to do. We're going to wrap this episode, and then we're going to start and record the next episode. I like to keep these around 30 minutes, and we still have a lot to get to. So, folks, for this week, that is the end of this episode of The Real Deal Show. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube. Give us the thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you listened on the audio podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next week. We're going to continue this conversation, and I will see you in the surf.
Thanks, guys.
Woo!